Well, we're a little past 1:30, so why don't we go ahead and reconvene and continue where we left off. And my understanding is we left off with our facilities director, Mike Elder, was going to provide some information about potential options with renovations related to human services. Director Elder, are you on?
I am on.
Okay, and, please go ahead.
There are a lot of questions that were asked. And one of the ones that was asked was how much free space is in the courthouse? And that is really pretty minimal. I'm going to try and share a screen with you all. My computer's not acting real well right now. I tried to do a little bit more of a in-depth display, but it's not working. So let me try and see what I can do here. Okay. I don't know. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see the 5th floor of the courthouse? Because I can't see it.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So the areas that I'm going to show you are the ones that are open right now. And it's this little corner down here and the space along the outside of the wall, which is roughly about 2,200 square feet. There is an area over here right now that is leased out that could be opened up, and that's 900 square feet. So it's about 3,100 square feet that we would be able to potentially use for Mary Ann or the program. But one of the things that is in the winds, and it was part of the project to move the departments not related to the courthouse out of the courthouse and make it all court related, was at the time branch 5 had wanted to expand their courtroom because they have got the smallest courtroom in the courthouse. And that was going to take just about all of this space here. So, you know, if we've got competing interests here that someone needs to set a priority on what's going to be done. If we use this space for the programs, this hallway here is a fire exit, so we can't block that off. So you'd have a function over here and a function over here that if they're supposed to be readily accessible to each other, it's kind of hampered by that corridor. The rest of the courthouse is full. And we actually have some other departments right now that are asking how can they expand and get more space. And it's pretty much everybody is fit in there with the space that they had given us that they needed when we did the project back in 2011, something like that. So that's the courthouse. Mary Ann needs roughly 4,000 square feet for her operations. The courthouse really wouldn't fit her space. If we look at expanding of the diversionary program, that's already got about 1,500 square feet in the basement of the Oren King building. If they move and take the first floor of the Oren King building, that puts them at about 5,000 square feet that they would have. They wouldn't fit up on the 5th floor of the courthouse either, if it would grow to the size of a program that we're hoping it will. The other option that was talking about was if we would add on to the Oren King building. And that was something that was addressed, long before we put on the security addition and everything to the courthouse. It was looked at what we could do to move the departments out of the safety building into the courthouse. And we had talked about putting on an addition onto the King building at that time. It kind of basically rests on how big of an addition you would want. If it goes above 1 story, we would probably end up having to put an additional elevator in there so that we met the accessibility requirements. And we're probably looking at between $500 and $750 a square foot to build a building right now. So if we're talking about adding on a 4,000 square foot addition, we're talking about a $2 million project right now. And that's without doing any kind of planning or cost estimating. That's just an off the cuff. We do have space available for Mary Ann. It's remote, and that's at the Carter's building. And it has enough space to meet her needs. And that's probably the fastest option that we have to getting space available for the diversion project in the King building. So that's what I think. I've answered most of the questions. If you want to refresh my memory or ask me more questions, I'm willing to answer as best I can.
Like when you say the Carter building, do you mean the Bagash building? Is that the Carter building?
Yeah, it's on the corner of State and Otter.
Okay.
It's the one that Carter's used to occupy, but they vacated in November.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Elder. I see one hand up. Supervisor Fari, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank Mr. Elder for also indulging the concerns here and staying available this afternoon. If you can go over the time frame as to when you would expect our Corp Council to be moved. Let's start with that question.
Okay, to do that, we're going to need funding to make some of the modifications that would make the space readily available for her. And that would be coming before the county board as part of a capital project in January. So, we'd probably be looking at, late next year to be able to have her in that building.
Okay, and on the other, so that would be, let's call that the immediate issue, getting her moved within 2022. Then the long-term issue, as has been brought up by Supervisor Binder and others, is adding on to the Oren King building. If we were to approve that in 2022, what would be the time frame to complete that?
That I would probably say 18 months.
So you'd be looking at early 24.
Probably. One of the things that, it's a broken record now. If the supply chain doesn't get straightened out, all bets are off. It's taking me close to 6 months to get a set of doors. It's taking about 6 months to get garage doors. This project wouldn't have garage doors. Copper wire is at a premium now. So it's, 18 months is something that would be a normal type process over the years that I've been working with you guys. If things don't get better with supplies, it could be 2 years, just waiting for parts.
Follow-up question, and thank you for your review of the 5th floor of the courthouse. You indicate that the square footage space would be less than what is desired. Would that be the right term for Mary Ann? But the question becomes, could she utilize that space for the next 18 months in a satisfactory position to minimize the impact on her office?
That one I would have to defer to her. Because my opinion and hers probably may not jive.
I'll ask Corporation Counsel for her thoughts in regards to that.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. I can.
First of all, the court administrator is currently in part of that space. So there would be an issue of trying to remove the court administrator from the space. The remaining space was actually part of the former jail. And there would be significant remodeling needed, coupled with the fact that it would not satisfy our needs because we have 3 attorneys, 4 support staff, paralegals, conference room, 2 conference rooms. And given the space without the county administrator's room, it would not work. We also have many files that we are hoping to start to upload. I know I've spoken with the county administrator, and that's something we want to try to do in 2022. But it would be, I believe that space would not satisfy our needs, even if it's for 18 months.
Dad's not back yet, huh? Oh, okay.
Well, I think
Anything
that's
further?
a question, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
Hi, Mike. I guess my question would be is what is the cost to remodel the Carter building and then to remodel the Oren King building for the diversity committee versus if we add on that addition for $2 million for the diversity committee, we do not have to remodel the Oren King building itself. So what is the cost to remodel the Carter building and remodel the Oren King building for the Connect program? What would you estimate that to be at?
Okay, to redo the Carter's building, or we're calling it the State Street building now because Carter's is out of there. I'm working on an estimate of about $500,000.
And then what would it cost you to remodel the Oren King building for the Connect program?
My understanding is they'd be able to use the first floor and the basement the way it is.
So in other words, what we'd really be talking is $1.5 million difference because Mary Ann could stay where she is and the addition could be for the Connect program. So we could accommodate both of them at that facility and it would actually cost us around $1.5 million more. But we would be saving, Mary Ann's going to be traveling at least 7 hours a week. So that's basically 60 days a year with no work being done, just basically cleaning your car off and traveling. You know, I hope the rest of my county board sees it the same as I do. But if this project's going to come forward in January, the only way I'll support it is with an addition.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Okay, so I think we've kind of, and I don't want to offend anybody, but we're off the track here a little bit. This should have been handled some other time under county board situation. I am against, I don't think this is a budget hearing. This is not a facilities hearing. So my thing is, I think Mary Ann should stay near the courthouse, but I'm not going to talk much about that. We can bring this all up in January and figure out what we're going to do. So my take is we should move on and go through the budget items that we have listed and put this at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers and Supervisor Buck. But Supervisor Gabbard does bring up a point. We don't want to go too far from the budget. And we spent a fair amount of time on this. So I think we need to be mindful of that going forward. But please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
I'm going to agree with, I had a question asked, but I'm going to agree with Supervisor Gabbard, and I'm going to wait until we can discuss facilities to ask my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
I'll just make it quick here. Mary Ann, where are other corporate councils located in other counties? Are they next to the courthouse, close to the courthouse? That's it. Thank you.
Yes, Supervisor Buck. The offices I know are located either in the courthouse or adjacent to the courthouse.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Buck. So seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude the Human Services budget. And we'll move on to the next budget, which is the Parkview Health Center budget. That starts on page 439. I believe our Administrator Kara Gruber is not quite available just yet, so we're going to actually go, if Martin Rudd is available, we're going to go to the UWO Fox Cities campus budget first. Dr. Rudd, are
Did we know
you?
that Bill Topol was done?
Yes, we were finished with human services.
Okay.
There were no other calls.
Okay.
So Dr. Rudd, are you on the call?
What page
Believe
on
he's
there,
on the-
Doctor?
I believe he's on. So we're on the UWO Fox Cities campus budget. It starts on page 456.
There we go.
And Dr. Martin Rudd, do you want to provide a review, any highlights for your budget?
Martin may be in another meeting currently.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is there
Can we
any
ask
highlights that you
Joanne
want to
to,
provide on the budget?
So this is Joanne Reif and I'm with UW Oshkosh, the facilities group. And I would let the board know that the overall budget for the UW Oshkosh Fox Cities campus is split funded between Outagamie County as well as Winnebago County. And there is no staffing that is covered under either one of those budgets, as the staffing is covered by the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and the system office. There are some changes in some allocations across the lines in the budget because we did take some of the funding and move it around so it was more accurate to the way we were expending the budget on the operating side. But other than that, I will take any questions that there may be.
Very good, thank you. We'll open it up for any questions on the UWO Fox Cities campus budget. Any questions from any county support supervisor? I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joanne, one of the things I have the most trouble with is that food service capital item. And could you talk a little bit about that? And I'm wondering if there has been some study on revenue that would offset the cost of that project, and anything you can tell us to justify the expense that is going to be needed there.
So I could tell you that we are looking forward to coming to the facilities committee next week to present the feasibility study that answers the question of why and how the project would be moving forward. And then we would be following up at a future county board meeting to present that information as well. The areas that we're talking about on the campus are the current food service area that was built in 1959 and has not seen any renovations since then, when the student population was around about 150 students. And we are now at a timeline where we are more in the range of about 900 to 950 students on the campus. The rest of the space that's there is an area where we have the student organization offices, as well as a large meeting area and the recreation space. So it's the student development area as part of the building and the square foot. So we are looking to be able to utilize that more effectively, be able to bring the student organization out from the back side of that presentation area, which would allow us to then fully use the space again. And in order to get us a facility that would actually do food service for the group that are currently on the campus, and the food that our students are interested in having, we need to increase the size of the kitchen area, and then also have the rest of the programmatic spaces, as I mentioned earlier, for the student organizations and the programming space, so that the students who are on the campus can stay fully engaged, which will help to create a more effective and longer program space for the students so that they can learn and stay engaged. And by having students on campus and part of those presentations, it helps to actually keep them more engaged in the campus and helps with a better GPA. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background about what the project is, and I look forward to being able to present it more effectively.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorstein. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add to what Joanne just said, the number of students attending UW Fox Valley at that time in 1959, when they built the first food service, was 167 students. We're looking at right now into the foreseeable future between 950 and 1,000 students a year. So I made the statement once before, I'll make it one more time and then I'll shut up. It's like building your house in 1959 and all your appliances are avocado and goldenrod. It's about time to upgrade it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead, Supervisor Keller.
Thank you. Tom and Joanne both indicated that they expect the student population to be about 900, 950. I don't know if that's being projected into the future very far. I know student participation is down in the area. But beside that, the school was originally intended to be for service to local students in the Fox Valley area there. What percentage of that 900 and 950 is actually students from the local area versus, because I know there's an international student participation program going on. I'm just wondering, what of that 900, 950, how many are actually from the local area that the school was originally intended to support?
Hi, everyone. This is Martin Rudd, Assistant Chancellor for Access Campuses. Nice to see you all again. I can take that question from Rob. So the breakdown that we have for fall 2020, the latest data that we have on the enrollments is that 61% of our new freshmen were from Outagamie County, and 29% of our new freshmen were from Winnebago County.
So approximately 90% from local area. That's good to hear.
That's right. There's a small smattering as well. And you're exactly right, Rob, that these campuses were designed to educate locally, and they still have that effect. And we just happen to have a unique program of international recruitment with a third party provider. We have smaller numbers from Brown County and Waushara County, and as you would expect.
The only thing I want to mention is these capital improvement program that we have coming up just for the rest of the supervisors is estimated at, I think, a total of $8 million over the next couple of years. That would be for the student development. And also, I think there was another program to make a total of $8 million. Now, granted, Winnebago County is only responsible for half of that. We share it with Outagamie County. So we're still looking at about $4 million to invest in this school in the next couple of years. That's all I have.
Thank you, Supervisor Keller. We have one other call, and I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Keller's statements kind of led into this at the risk of a dumb question. When this was UW Fox Cities, I believe it was called, it was more of a 2-year local thing. Now it's UWO, and I'm confused as to why the county is paying for something in the UW system. That's a state school. And I get the whole part of the local population that goes there. You could use the same argument for UW Oshkosh, we don't pay for that. And I don't want to get a big conversation going here, but it's just something I've wondered since this was switched over, why a county is paying for a UW system, which we know there's billions of dollars in that system. It's not, don't quite understand it. That just mostly.
I'll be happy to take that question, Supervisor Rasmussen. So when the restructuring took place in the UW system, almost exactly 4 years ago, it started. The change was that the then UW colleges, the institution that made up all 13 two-year campuses, was broken apart, and the two-year campuses were joined with a neighboring four-year campus. There was no change whatsoever to the operating agreements that the Board of Regents have with the local counties in how the campuses are operated. Yes, we branded ourselves as UW Oshkosh. All of our students are UW Oshkosh students, and that's how they are recruited, and that's how they're taught, and that's how we have our catalog. But nothing about our 1970 agreement changed one bit. So the Oshkosh campus is still funded through the state, and we have this unique relationship at the Fox Cities campus, now the UWO Fox Cities campus, whereby the personnel are still all paid for by the state. The counties do not pay any personnel at the UWO Fox Cities campus. And what you pay for is the maintenance, the annual maintenance on the buildings, and then the capital, any capital projects that come through. And that's the existing relationship with all 13 of the former two-year campuses of the UW colleges. They all maintain that unique partnership either with their county or the municipality, or in some cases both.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. I see no other call-ins.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes, please go ahead, Supervisor Konecki.
I don't know if, excuse me, if I heard right, but I thought Joanne invited us that next week we can go on a tour if we want to, but she never gave a time or date. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what she said.
Ms. Reif, can you answer that?
So we are going to be in front of the facilities committee at their meeting next week, doing the presentation of the feasibility study. If anyone is interested as a board member and would like to do a tour of the facility, please contact me and we can schedule a time to make that happen.
Okay, I was wrong a little bit, but you gave me some information I wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Are there any other questions from any county board supervisor? I don't see any other call-ins. Very good. Thank you both, Ms. Reif, and also Dr. Rudd, for being here today and your information. Much appreciated. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a great day. So that concludes the UWO Fox Cities campus budget review. So we're going to move back up to number 7, Parkview Health Center. That starts on page 439. And Executive Damel, anything you want to review in regards to the Parkview Health Center budget before we go to Administrator Gruber?
No, but we're gonna go ahead and let Director Gruber handle this.
Very good. Administrator Gruber, anything you want to highlight or review in regards to the Parkview Health Center budget?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think the biggest difference here between this year's budget and last year's budget still is reflective, obviously, of the continued pandemic here. Biggest changes are in wages and fringe benefits. And then you'll also see we did have a change to the table of organization. We are not adding or eliminating any positions, but essentially kind of shifting some positions to make 2 different lead positions within our food nutrition service department, essentially due to some staffing struggles that we've had there, and looking at that as an alternative. And then the other piece, I guess, to highlight here is our continued work on some of our projects that have been delayed due to COVID, as well as the capital project to change out the dishwasher in the kitchen as well.
Very good. Thank you. We'll open it up for any questions from any county board supervisor. Any questions in regards to the Parkview Health Center budget? I see Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cara, I just had a question. Have you had to limit admissions because of the staffing issues?
Yes and no. We're limiting admissions at this time, mostly due to our COVID requirements. So for example, right now, skilled nursing facilities are still pretty highly regulated when we have any positive case, whether that be a staff member or a resident test positive. We're doing twice weekly testing still at this time due to the increased community rates as well. So typically that is what's been hindering our admissions more than anything, and why our census continues to remain as low as it has. What we'll see is when we are open, we'll have an influx of admissions, but then we'll have an incident that occurs that requires us to close for a temporary period because of COVID, resulting in, some discharges and inability to readmit. We are looking at alternatives with staffing right now. The biggest thing I'm hopeful for is getting the door project on Parkside 2 completed. Right now, that unit is still considered a locked unit. There are 11 beds up there that are open and able to be used without changing our staffing. So my hope would be to fill that unit first. And then we may end up looking into the future on some unique staffing to continue to admit beyond that. But I think that's the biggest struggle right now is, those closures due to COVID, and then as well as that project being continued to be delayed at this time.
Very good. And did the wage changes we made make any difference in your ability to recruit and retain?
I think overall it's made a difference in our ability to retain more so than recruit. I think we're still seeing some struggles as everyone is. Our like facilities and peers out there in the community are struggling with staffing just as much as we are at this point. But I do think that the bleed from losing staff has subsided a little bit because of the wage increases.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Any other questions in regards to the Parkview Health Center budget? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the budget. Thank you very much, Administrator Gruber, for being here and for your information and your time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So now we'll move back down to number 9, which is the University Extension budget. It starts on page 465. And Executive Damo, anything you want to highlight before we go to Director Chris Vial?
I just want to appreciate his ability and willingness to work with multiple counties and multiple budgets. I'm sure this isn't fun for him, so we're going to let him go ahead and present his budget.
Very good. Director Vial, any highlights you want to provide in regards to the University Extension budget?
Yep, I'd like to just share just a couple of an overview of the significant changes that some of the supervisors may see. One of the things that you may note on page 472 in the table is that we are making a programmatic shift in 2022 to collect program revenue and then also do expenses for the 4-H program, largely due to the increased amount of risk management and contract services that need to be entered into for the 4-H educator to comply with our with our risk management compliance with our UW Madison partner, as we are a partner organization, or we have a partner with the county and the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. So for accountability purposes, that's where you will see increased revenue, but you will also see many of the areas in which you see increased expenses. Those are allocated it's for an in and an out relating to the 4-H program. Also is an increase for added schools in our Sources of Strength program. This is a evidence-based program conducted by Mandy Dornfeld that works and touches every school district in the county to build on sources of strength for youth, and not only youth, and also their peers and teachers around them, their support structures, to identify their strength as part of a suicide reduction mental health awareness initiative. One of the other things that you will see is an increase in the tuition area, because it's actually a relatively small increase as far as dollar wise, but the percentage increase is shown in the percent column fairly great, because of the small amount. This is for a recertification and an additional certification for Mandy Dornfeld in that Sources of Strength program, for her to attend and to become a certified facilitator for a business, to be able to offer sources of strength in our area business and increase the capacity for our community for the Sources of Strength, which is again is a suicide reduction and mental health awareness program, grassroots program. The other tuition are other operating supplies and registration tuition other that you'll see those increases. Those are directly related to those program revenues, primarily for the 4-H camp program, the summer camp program. So those items come very close to offsetting each other. And then because we are a small department, just the change in licensing for all of our computers, as we change from line items, it just shows a very large number as far as percentage wise, because we are a small department, and and so that's where that's evident. So, or that's how it demonstrates itself. So with that, those are some highlights, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you. We'll open it up to questions. I see one call, and I'll call on Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might ask the question of your agricultural educator, what is the current status and forecast for that position?
That position is currently vacant. We had a resignation in that position, and so that position is vacant. The status, working with our local agricultural community, conversation with the Extension Committee and the Executive's Office to look at implementing or participating in a regional staffing model or regional staffing strategy that will focus on a crops educator, so an individual that will focus on agronomy over and include 2 or 3 counties of service, but also have a dairy educator within a similar regional educator. These would be 2 separate positions, because the content areas, the need for content areas best meets the needs of the producers and our agricultural support network. So we're moving toward implementing that. The position just became officially vacant on the 22nd of October. So we are currently in process. Any changes, I've already had preliminary conversations. Any changes will not increase the current proposed budget. So we will work within what is currently proposed to ensure that our producers and our agricultural support networks in Winnebago County will have access to University of Wisconsin Extension resources.
Thank you for your comment. I'm very pleased to see you're going that direction. I think dividing it into more of a crop specialist and a dairy specialist is very good focus. So thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Farley. Next speaker is Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two quick items. Seeing the list of accomplishments is always really impressive to understand the breadth of where your programming lives in our communities and the agencies that it connects with. I'm hoping you could talk a little bit more about the Rent Smart program number. Oops, I didn't write down which number. As both the work that you did as an accomplishment in 2021, but also what it looks like as a goal in 2022. Kind of in light of some of the other conversations we've had today and yesterday about evictions and things like that. I'm just wondering if that Rent Smart program intersects with some of those questions.
So the short answer is yes, it does intersect in a couple ways of how. So Todd Wenzel is our financial educator, our extension financial educator. That is a half-time or a 0.5 position. He has another half-time position in another area in extension. So in that half-time, Todd is able to. So one, he needs to be focused in very specifically financial education. The two main areas, or I guess there are three main areas. One is Rent Smart, is teaching Rent Smart. Winnebago County and the Winnebago County tenants or the landlords are one of the few, if not the, very, very few groups in the state that actually will look and treat a Rent Smart certificate as 1 year of good rental history. So that is something that is that I'd like to say it's often imitated, but we can't, many of the other counties can't even get their groups to imitate that. So it is a very favorable position to be in. In addition to working with through the landlords and other referrals, other community networks, AdvoCap. Todd also just recently, he had just prior to the pandemic starting, and now just recently has been able to get back into Oshkosh Correctional to provide that same education to individuals who are very close to re-entering the workforce and exiting the facility. The other, so that's one of the key pieces. Todd also has the capacity to do financial coaching. So this is not financial counseling. He doesn't work with creditors, but he does do coaching with individuals one-on-one to help them work through identify budgets and spending plans, and to do through a specific set of kind of a curriculum and a four meeting set of coaching guides to help individuals get their feet underneath them. The other piece is that, and this is where the interactions come in. Todd's an active member of the eviction task force. So he is regularly meeting with that group, doing the connections. That's where a lot of the referrals for the Rent Smart program. So doing what he can do within providing, using the extension education resources to help combat that issue, but then also partnering with those other organizations and referring back and forth, so that each of those groups that are part of that effort are able to basically be able to do what they're good at, but knowing that they all need to work together to do their own part, and even the little things will help make a big difference.
Thank you. That sounds fantastic. A year of like good rent credit for that program is probably a really valuable thing for a lot of folks. One more question. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit more about, let's see, goal and objective number 10, to evaluate needs and offer relevant parenting programming for our community via technology, and maybe more broadly, how how you're planning to, how either you're planning to incorporate more technology uses or barriers that you are seeing in being able to deliver your programming via the technology we've all learned to use over the last year and a half.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have said, in my staff in all of the counties that I work with are probably getting sick, and they could probably almost repeat this. The COVID pandemic really gave Extension a crash course in trying to recreate and adapt programs to a new platform that we always knew was there, but because you didn't necessarily have to take the training wheels off, you stayed with your tried and true, your face-to-face programs or your face-to-face meetings, which, let's face it, that's what many of our educational efforts, that's what we're really good at. Extension's been doing that since roughly 1914, and we do it really, really well. Many of our other groups have, and it's still a best practice. It's still a really good tool. And when that opportunity was taken away, we really shifted. So, for example, just to reference a very specific example with the RentSmart program, that was a 100% face-to-face online that in just about 3 months, that RentSmart statewide team converted that to an all online program, so that because individuals still needed places to live and still needed to make good financial decisions. So the parenting programs, there's a couple of different parenting programs that are offered through Extension that are evidence-based and research-based, and those have been shifted over to offer that they were offered a little bit less so than, say, RentSmart, as far as because there were some nuances to the curriculum, but they were offered using online format. What we're finding is that using virtual allows you to reach some audiences that you were never able to reach because when you had a physical location that people needed to come to for an educational program, sometimes you have barriers like transportation, and with that, so this would eliminate that. And then that also amplified some of the other areas. And I know your question was relating to specifically the one goal, but we did find that some of the other barriers were, as we get outside of the city of Oshkosh and Neenah and Menasha, our internet connectivity isn't always 100%. So some of our rural and agricultural producers didn't necessarily weren't able to always connect. And in the same breath, I say that there are some of our agricultural programs that went virtual statewide that had their highest levels of participation that they've had in years. So it's just the balance of having good connectivity, because those that have good internet connectivity are using it and have access to more programs before, because now they have virtual or hybrid programs and they have face-to-face programming that they can choose from. But those that don't have that reliable access, then they have to wait for those opportunities for that hybrid, which allows a face-to-face option or those full face-to-face educational moments. Our grandparents raising grandchildren group, which is a support group for those who the caregivers, they're non-parent caregivers for high-risk students, high-risk youth, has been going on. It did not adapt as well to an online or virtual program. So trying to make some high touch opportunities, but just now this, hopefully things will turn a corner so that they can begin that very critical face-to-face programming to provide that support to those groups.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. Sounds like a wild new world to try to create simultaneous programming that is accessible for people both virtually and in person. Appreciate the discussion. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Yes,
Shiloh,
please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
if I can add just one thing, the last thing that Chris touched on was grandparents raising their grandchildren. in Winnebago County, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but it's close to 1,900 kids being raised by their grandparents. So that's why as soon as we can get back to face, it's imperative that we do so for that program.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Any other questions for the Director of UW Extension, University Extension? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda. Thank you very much, Director Viel, for all you do and then for being here today. Much appreciated. Very good. So we'll move on to number 10, which is the Parks and Boat Launch Program budgets. They start on page 479. And Executive Damel, any comments or review you want to provide before we go to Director Briest? And if you could just unmute your mic, Executive Damel.
I was saying, I think we got a lot done this year. It's been a pleasure working with Director Briest, and I know we have some decisions to make going forward with parks, and I look forward to having those conversations. And let's turn it over to Director Briest.
Very good. Director Briest, any highlights and review of the parks budget you'd like to make?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the entire board for allowing me to present my first Parks Department budget. Just real brief overview of just a few goals that we have going into 2022 that we've even started a little bit in 2021. We're looking to continually address the maintenance needs of the entire park system as we look at areas that could be use some improvement. We want to begin tracking use of our facilities. Many times in the parks department, it can seem hard to track use, but we want to add trail counters to our trails and to our boat launches so we can get some real data to be able to present in the future on these goals and these achievements, and to be able to track that data across multiple years. Also, we want to work in 2022 on better informing the public about all the park amenities and the Sunnyview Expo. To continue to advertise what we do have and be able to communicate that to the residents so they know what their taxpayer dollars are going towards and the benefits and the amenities they have here in Winnebago County. And then also we want to begin working towards the goal of making the boat landing fund more self-sufficient. Over the last several years, it's been in a deficit or in a negative each year. We've had fund balance in there, so it's in good shape now, and that's why it's good time to make that correction. I included significant changes for the parks on page 44 and 485, and the boat landing on 495. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Director Briest. We'll open it up for any questions from any county board supervisor on the parks budget and boat launch program. Any questions from any county board supervisor?
Are you looking to make the boat ramps more handicap accessible?
Yes, as we're working we began the process in July with the Parks and Recreation Committee on working with our capital improvement plan, and part of that is going to be come January some presentations on some boat launch improvements. And we're always looking within our park system with all of our different amenities. We need to, whenever we renovate something or remodel something, we need to definitely bring it up to ADA code, and where we can within our maintenance. For instance, just an example, we had our trail in Community Park that dead ended right before Snell Road. This year, we worked with the Highway Department very simply to extend that to Snell Road and now have an ADA access to the sidewalk on Snell. So we're always looking for the improvements and where we can do them within our operating budget. And so, yes, we will be continuing to look at that with the boat landings as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We'll move next. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. We'll move next to Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos.
I was wondering, have we done any planning or work on that new natural area that was included with that property that we bought that's behind the community gardens area? It's in the back corner of the property. I don't remember the name of the property, but it was, I haven't heard anything about that, and I wondered if there were any plans in the works for that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the Netzer property. And there's been a few improvements that were done with it this year. The new tractor that we purchased with the flail mowers, we were able to mow that this fall after we received the tractor at the end of September to start working that area. We do have to, in some of the area, we're going to start working on disking the area and making it more usable to be able to start establishing more of a turf, more of a grass footing. Also, we did open the Netzer Nature Preserve, or did a small grand opening this summer. We'll be continuing to work in that area as well. Part of the Sunnyview Expo plan that was presented to the county board in 2019, we're currently working on phase 1. And in fact, the contractor started out there last week for phase 1, which is more right along County Highway Y and improving some of the camping areas. But part of that process is going to be to really look at, and myself being new, working with our staff that have been here for a while and know the existing use, but then also taking a fresh set of eyes and fresh look at that future plan, because that Netzer property and improvements to it need to be included in it somewhere. So we are looking at that. It's a few years out in the capital improvement plan in terms of any major improvements. But we're going to continue to do things operationally to make it more usable for camping in the meantime.
Okay, thank you for the update, Adam.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker, Supervisor Schellinger, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was just hoping you could comment on sort of the direction that rental revenues and some of those some of those associated events that we have traditionally hosted, how those are looking sort of as we complete 2021 and into 2022 and beyond.
That's a very good question. Yeah, and I started in May, and from my understanding, about a month or two before I started, some of the Sunnyview Expo events were still shut down. So we just started back up this spring with events. So we haven't had quite a full year. We did also have, so we had a pretty steady summer. We did have an event or two cancel. We had 1 or 2 weekends open. And then this fall, we did have 1 or 2 events cancel as well due to the Delta variant and some of their vendors, especially events like the Pet Expo, where they have vendors coming in, and a lot of the vendors were nervous about everything that was going on. And so, I'd have to say, for coming off of COVID, we've had a successful year in terms of being able to generate some revenue and keep a lot of our existing clients from previous years. I will say, going into 2022, if you look at our calendar, and we're continually working on making it more user-friendly on our website so you can better see things. But pretty much from Memorial Day through the 3rd weekend in September, we have all but I believe one weekend open. Or I should say other way around, only one is open and all the rest are booked. And what our goal is with this first phase of the Expo project is to move all the equestrian use and programming to that East Campus, and then be able to use the West Campus for more programming. For instance, the Expo could have events within the Expo while we still have an equestrian event, as long as it's not, an extremely large event, to try to continue to maximize. And that's one of the goals, is to maximize the use of the facilities over there and the other park facilities as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there, it sounds like there's some kind of big changes to the way these events are being just run and everything. Do you have everything you and your team need to keep up with that? It feels like you have kind of a limited staff compared to all the different things you're doing to have something as big as maybe the post-COVID or during COVID delivery of events. Yeah, do you have everything you need, or are there ways that you think we're going to need to adjust this budget in the future to make sure that we can continue to have large events, but also operate safely and at sort of the comfort level of the vendors?
I think that's a really good question, because that is something that I have been looking into, and it's something we're going to be doing an exercise over the winter as well. What I can say is we have fantastic staff. What we did this summer, traditionally, from my understanding with history, it was the expo staff very much kind of worked on the expo side, and the park staff worked throughout the other 800,000 acres we have. This summer, we actually, due to staffing shortage, because we lost our parks caretaker over at the expo, our parks caretakers over on this side had to help out a lot. And we found a lot of efficiencies with that, that we could get some cleaning up from events done within 3 to 4 hours. Yes, it took 2 or 3 staff, but instead of doing it for 3 days with 1 staff member. So we found a lot of efficiencies there. To your point, though, we're doing a few things. First of all, one of my concerns potentially is with the weekends. Right now, when we have our events, we have weekend coverage from 7 in the morning until 1 p.m., which means that our events don't have any coverage in the afternoon. Now, this is just the way things have been run. That's our regular part-time staff. They work every other weekend, every other event all year round. But potentially, as we go through 2022 and I have a chance to evaluate things even a little better, looking at to see, from, like you're saying, like a safety standpoint, and from a standpoint of being able to take care of the clients to the best of our ability, do we need that evening coverage? Our facility is set up very bare bone, in the sense of you rent the facility and you pretty much rent the shell. Everything else is kind of programmed by yourself or by your group. We don't necessarily do a lot of the programming. We just provide a lot of the space. Now, staff have been looking into, as we're talking about maximizing revenue and maximizing the use of the space. For instance, as an example, I've been talking to staff, and staff brought this up to me about purchasing stalls, or more stalls for our barns. So that way we have a lot of renters and promoters that have larger events and need to rent stalls, and there's only 1 or 2 vendors throughout the state. So it can be pretty hard to get those stalls, and they're buying them anyway. So could we potentially have more of our own and up our fee because now we're including the stalls? So there's all those types of things we're looking at. And in general, when you're talking about staff and our workload, and really you talk about the parks and the trails and the dog parks and everything else we have, we're going to be working this winter on a park maintenance plan. And the idea with that is we're going to be looking at every function that we perform and the 4 parks caretaker staff that we have, and look at where are the hours going, where's the work going, and then that way we can really put that on our website to show the public what we do on a daily, monthly basis, and what our different partnerships are with our Friends of the Dog Park groups, our soccer clubs. That really help us to do more than we could do with just 4 staff. So that's gonna be an exercise we do to better identify where our hours are going and where our maintenance priorities are. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Appreciate the forethought. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about how do you handle how your department handles communication. You have a Facebook page, is that right?
Yep, we have a Facebook page.
Do you have a staff position that manages that, or how is that sort of built? Is that built into anybody's job description?
Yeah, so we have a lot of, as you alluded to earlier with our staff size, we share a lot of things, and we have to cover each other a lot of times. In actually my proposed table of organization changes for next year, we're not necessarily increasing the number of staff we have. However, for instance, our administrative assistant is very talented, and they came from when COVID hit and there was some layoffs. Basically, they came from the Oshkosh Visitor and Convention Bureau, and they did a lot of marketing. So utilizing our staff's talents, we want to change that position basically to a marketing and program coordinator to better funnel all our marketing and advertise the events that we have at the park. Advertise the number of times I've heard in my first 6 months here that, oh, I never knew about this trail, or I never knew that the park had this or had that. I never knew about Kenny Roble Park or the dog park over here, or the Waukau Nature Preserve, Waukau Dam. A lot of people don't know about those things. So making sure that we're putting that work into that. Just as an example, he was working today on creating a newsletter that we're going to now email out to everyone within our database now that we have an online boat rental reservation system and facility reservation system. The idea is we're going to start creating a database to continue and promote that on Facebook too, to build that. So we're definitely, I haven't got out as much as I'd like to, but I've been trying to do some Facebook Lives to better answer questions for the residents right on the spot. We did that for the dog park, and it's really nice to be able to just communicate right with the residents right there and answer questions via Facebook Live.
Fantastic. So before, as things are right now, those responsibilities were just sort of tacked on to whoever was the last person to step back when you said step forward if you want to run the Facebook page.
Yeah, essentially our expo manager was doing expo. Our administrative assistant was already doing that work pretty much in his role. And then myself picking up some of that as well. And they're still going to be shared, there's still going to have to be coverage, but primarily giving that over to that position.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I appreciate recognizing that is important work and making that shift in this budget. Thanks. That's all the questions I have.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make reference to page 495, significant changes from the 2021 adopted boat landing. Under the account heading of capital improvements is a $200,000 amount that is expended or to be expended, was to be expended for the Grundman boat landing project. If my recollection is correct, Vicki Redlin made a presentation to the county board in respect to that project. And I think that there was some astronomical figure, like about $2 million is what this would run. The problem being how to turn around a boat, a pickup truck with a boat attached. And one of our supervisors, I believe it was Mary Beth Gabbert, said that that problem could be resolved by putting additional gravel on vacant land adjacent to the parking lot, and that would solve the problem for about $25,000 with our highway department doing the work. Could you address this project, the amounts we can expect that to require, and what about the inexpensive solution?
Absolutely. No, it's a good question, and I appreciate you bringing it up. So I think really looking at two different things here. There was in our operational budget, there was actually on that same page, you'll see $22,500 for work from the highway department. And that was to potentially put in a turnaround at the end of the Grundman boat launch. The $200,000, which was then supposed to be matched with $100,000 Wisconsin DNR, probably recreational boating grant, which can typically go up to 50%. Basically, that was probably more part of a larger capital project and improvement. I will say that $200,000, I personally was not able to figure out exactly what those $200,000 were going to be going towards and what they would be able to do. In order to apply for a Wisconsin DNR recreational boating grant, you do need permits in place. You need a plan. You need some engineering work to be completed. So instead of utilizing the funds and not utilizing how maybe it was envisioned by the previous director, we kind of started back at square one. So we have been working with the Parks and Recreation Committee since they're starting again in July. The Grumman boat launch that you were referring to, the larger project, the roughly $2 million project, we are at least investigating to see what types of partnerships and funds could be associated with that, because so there's a few issues to address with the Grumman boat launch. Yes, there is the safety issue with the turnaround. There's also a issue with the number of parking stalls and needing more parking stalls. And also the view that if we're going to add more parking stalls at that point, you need more landing space if you're going to have more users. And also Winnebago County has a great park, essentially. I mean, you can look at it as just a boat landing as well, but a great park right against Winnebago County or Lake Winnebago. And I think looking at a more complete project and at least doing our due diligence to see where potential funding could go to create a park that's not just for boat users, but can also be used for people fishing off the side, for people to be able to launch their canoes or kayaks and go out on a pier. I see a lot of people fishing out there when I go out there. We've been counting the cars and counting the attendants lately. So I think you have two different projects there, and we didn't want to, after talking with Executive Damo as well, and just looking at this future and being able to present this project, we didn't want to perform even a $22,000 fix that maybe in a year or two, we're just going to, potentially putting in a larger fix. So still, even at $22,000 is still a lot of money, and we still wanted to make sure that we're making the best, or putting the best foot forward. I will say in regards to the $2 million project, I have begun looking at grant opportunities. We have submitted for a $200,000 grant opportunity that's not affiliated with the Wisconsin DNR boating grant program that could give us another 50%. And it so far has received favorable reviews. I have not heard back on if we have been granted the $200,000 yet. So I can't announce anything there yet. But also been having conversations with the Visitor Tourism Bureau, and looking at opportunities, potentially for tourism grants and those types of things that could help fund a larger project like this, to reduce the size of the cost for the county. I hope that answers it, because I think there's two different pots of money, or two different funds that we're referring to there, are projects.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation, and it puts it in a little bit broader frame, and refreshes my recollection of the presentation to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
If I could just add on to that a little bit, another problem that we have there is there's not enough parking, and then they start parking on the road. And what's going to happen is someday there's going to be a fire, or an ambulance is going to need to get down there. And when you park a boat, trailer, and a vehicle on each side of the road, there really isn't enough room to get an ambulance or a fire truck down there. And it's kind of the same problem we're having with the Butamore boat launch. They're parking on Leonard's Point. There isn't even a shoulder on that road. It's truly a safety hazard. And both of those boat launches need to be addressed. And if we wouldn't have been taking all the money out of the boat launch fees to put the buoys out, we would have money to address those problems. But we've been spending $85,000 a year putting buoys out and charging people a boat launch fee. And we're not fixing the boat launches. We're putting buoys out with that money. So that's why that problem needed to be addressed. We have to basically bring these boat launches up so that they're safe for our public to basically launch their boat and park their trailer, and not have it where there's a hazard where you can't get a fire truck or an ambulance in there. But the reason I originally had my hand up is because we had the same problem in the Parks Department as every other department had with seasonal labor. And I was just going to ask Adam what he thought about maybe getting high school students to basically maybe do a little bit of weed eating, weed pulling, grass cutting, I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Mike Collar, but every department cannot get seasonals. And a Parks Department needs to run with seasonals to cut grass and pull weeds. If he had a chance to address that with Mike Collier to see if that was a possible option.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Yes, so this summer, it was a little too late this summer, but I have been working with Ron Montgomery and Director Collard on, we have a draft job description for basically allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to work at the park, performing basic maintenance tasks like pulling weeds and those types of things, spreading mulch, basically our basic landscaping. So we are looking at that. We are also looking at trying to see if we can recruit shoulder season mowers, basically to work from April through November. Provide a little bit more security in the sense of a little bit longer length of time. I've had success with that in previous places. Obviously, at the current job market, it's just like everyone else has been talking about. It's going to be, we're going to have to do some hard recruiting, and the seasonal rate is only as high as it is. So we're going to need to work on the recruiting there, because if we get 2 or 3 seasonals that can basically mow, that'll free up our full-time staff to be able to perform a lot of the other tasks that we may be falling short on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, I just wanted to mention, I have a sister who worked for the city of Middleton, and she was the director there. And they were able to use low-risk inmates to do some of their parks maintenance. And I don't know if you've considered looking at that, but and they bring their own supervisor of those people. So if you have an interest, I assume you already are aware of the programs, but that might be an option for us to use them where it is appropriate.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We have actually utilized that system as well in the previous years. From my understanding, obviously with COVID, that kind of stopped it. And then this year too, it pretty much stopped it as well. Hopefully next year we can reinstitute that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Zelmer. Oh, it looks like very good. Well, I don't see any other call-ins then, so that'll go ahead and conclude our Parks and Boat Launch Program budget review. Thank you very much, Director Barista, for all your information and your time. Much appreciated. Very good. We'll move on to budget number 11, which is the Register of Deeds budget. Starts on page 502. And before we go to Register of Deeds, Strohmeyer, Executive Damel, any comments or review regarding the Register of Deeds?
Well, the easiest budget to pass is the one that gives you over $400,000 to the levy. So that would be the deed. So we'll go ahead and let Natalie take this in.
Very good. Register of Deeds, Strohmeyer, any highlights you want to provide?
It's been a busy year with the interest rates being low, that we have taken in over 28,000 documents so far this year, which is a good 2,000 documents over last year when we were busy. So I am very proud of my staff for keeping up with the daily work so that a few of us could be working on the side projects that we've been trying to work on.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions for Register of Deeds, Strohmeyer. Any questions on the Register of Deeds budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that budget. Thank you very much, Register of Deeds, Strohmeyer, for being here. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
We got 3 more departmental budget reviews. Number 12 is the Planning, Property Lister, and Land Records Modernization Fund budget. Starts on page 513. Executive Damel, any comments before we turn it over to Director Bougie?
No, this one's pretty straightforward as well.
Very good. Director Bougie, any highlights or review you want to provide for the planning budget?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Our revenues are up over 20% over last year, and again, I think that has a lot to do with low interest rates and some pent up demand for building activity, development activity. So we're seeing some real good revenues right now. Overall, the revenues offset our budget about 30% of our budget is offset by revenue. So that helps. But overall, our 2022 budget is down a little bit over last year, or I should say the current year. And we look forward to another good year in 2022. So any questions?
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions for Director Bougie. This would be for property lister and land records modernization fund as well.
Right.
I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen. And if you could open up your mic, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we have Director Bougie here, could we get a status and update on how the municipalities are reacting to the redistricting process?
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I can certainly give you an update on that. All the municipalities have just adopted all their ward plans. Basically, what occurred is the county board adopted a tentative plan in September that was passed along to the local communities to develop their ward plans. And as of yesterday, all the municipalities have formally adopted their ward plans. And it is now ready for county board approval on November 16th. But before that, it'll go before the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee meeting on November 8th. So we're all set to go.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Supervisor Egan, are you still on? Oh, there's
nope. I had turned it over to Vice Chair Egan for just a couple of minutes. Very good. So any other questions or comments regarding the planning budget? All right, we're finished with it. So very good. So we'll move on to budget number 13, the land and water conservation budget. It starts on page 537. Before we move to Director Chad Casper, any comments you want to provide, Executive Damo?
Yeah, there was. It did come in, they came in a little bit above target. We rectified that by pushing back a truck for another year. There was a position that Director Casper came for, which was not allowed at the time in the executive session. We were waiting to see what the UW extension positions were going to be. We wanted to see if it was something close to what he was going to do. Since those are not aligned, I am aware that Supervisor Farr is probably going to be making an amendment to add that position back, which has my blessing. But other than that, I think it was pretty decent.
Thank you, Executive Damo. Director Casper, any other comments or review you want to make in regards to the budget?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go over a few of the significant changes on page 543 for our department. So if you look at the increase from agricultural trade and consumer protection of about $27,000, we got an increase from the state for staffing. Part of that is staffing money, and part of it is for cost sharing with farmers within the county. There was bipartisan support when they did the state budget. They really look at land conservation departments as boots on the ground. So a lot of the work that we do at the county level, we're sitting at the farm tables doing work with the farmers, and that's recognized on both sides of the aisle. So we did get support to increase our staffing within the department. The other grantor agencies, that was an increase on a number of grants for the department. There was some one-time revenue that I brought in for staffing time for a grant that I had written that we earned for the county. So that created some revenue for the department. And then we have a small bump for plat book sales. We're in the process of developing the 2022 plat book through our department. We're also going to offer a digital option as well. It's going to be an app for cell phones, which will be available to the public as well. So that gives us a little bump within our revenue. And Executive Damo referred to, you can see we're well below budget here for our levy target. And that's a reflection on what the executive had referred to as far as the truck, which we're going to wait until 2023 to replace that vehicle, and then that position that was initially removed in my initial budget request. So I would entertain any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Director Casper. We'll open up for any questions from any county board supervisor on the land and water conservation budget. I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Zelmer. Please go ahead, Supervisor Zelmer. And if you could go ahead and open up your mic, Supervisor Zelmer.
Chad, how much headway are we making on identifying non-point source pollution?
So that is a large part of what our department does. And we've been focusing our efforts recently on what are called MDV dollars, multi-discharger variance dollars. Those are dollars we get from point source polluters. So we're getting a number of dollars from the city of Fond du Lac right now, and we have to spend those dollars within given watersheds. So what we're doing within that watershed is we are running modeling that is showing the most highly erosive sites within that watershed. And then we follow up with outreach with the farmers and then make contacts. And then we're installing conservation projects on the land. So it's really focusing our efforts. Obviously, we're working county-wide, but that's where our focus has been for a lot of the non-point. And that will continue as we roll into the 9 key element plan that the county board approved the adoption of last year. We're going to be working through the county in the highest loading subwatersheds, working on not only the soil health efforts for that position request that we had talked about earlier, but then we'll be working on the hard practices as well. We'll be running that modeling, showing these highly erosive sites, and then working with the farmers to get projects installed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Zelmer. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Director Casper. Just a question on your plat books or your app that you're talking about developing. Is that just going to be a Winnebago County app, or?
Yes, that would be for Winnebago County. Our last plat book was done in 2017, so we're due for an update, but we've never had the digital option. So we're going through a separate company to develop the plat book, and then you can purchase it through that company. So we'll get all the details in early 2022 and that.
Would that be something similar to like, I don't know if you're familiar with Onyx Hunt plat book, something like that, that's already developed, is going to do something similar to that?
Yes, that is somewhat similar. It wasn't anything additional to have that option. It's just a service that the company provided. So we want to have the hard copies. We have a whole list in-house already, people wanting the 2022 plat books. And this was just an additional feature with the company that they would provide at no cost. We get a kickback for everyone that purchases the app through the company. We get $20 back to our department for the purchases made for that app.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Any other questions? I don't see any other call-ins.
Mr. Chair, I would like to.
Yes, please go ahead, Supervisor Defferty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that in regards to accomplishments, there's the completed farmland preservation program. And, you know, I'm on the Planning and Zoning Committee, and we know that this has been quite very, very difficult for our department, to say the very least. And I did have a question in regards to, it looks like the farmland preservation program shows that it was completed for 20 landowners. And, you know, what is the overall progress over the last 5 or 10 years in regards to the farmland preservation program? Are we starting to see more farmlands trying to, you know, complete this or less? What's the overall trend?
Well, in Winnebago County, it's a little bit of a unique situation. Our farmland preservation plan was not certified by DADCAP because there was a voluntary participation component. So we have currently one township, Neepiaskin is the only town that currently is doing farmland preservation. So that is the one township where we do the monitoring and we're overseeing to make sure these farmers are in compliance with the program. So I would say participation has gone down dramatically because of that. At least in this county. I know other counties where they have a lot more farmland and they have an approved plan through DADCAP, you have a lot more participation. I know Fond du Lac County, they have a pretty high percent of that county where there's farmers enrolled in that. That is not the case in Winnebago.
Okay, that kind of confirmed my suspicions. I just wanted to get confirmation from you as well. Also, obviously, I know that this has been a constant work in progress, but I know that there's been this constant project in regards to restoring the water quality for Lake Winnebago, and wanted to just get an overall progress report on that because, you know, I've been, you know, I live nearby Lake Winnebago. I see it pretty much every day. And it looks like the quality of the water has improved. So just wanted to get kind of a report or update from you on that.
Sure. So we had the lake management plan that was approved, I think it was 2020. And that's a regional approach. It's the Winnebago Waterways Program. So we contribute 20,000 from our county. Calumet and Fond du Lac do the same. And there's a coordinator through Foxwolf Watershed that leads those efforts for all the work done on the lakes. So there's a number of things going on. I mean, our department gets heavily involved with the installation of break walls, which creates wetland habitat, which grows plants, cleans up the water, creates habitat, wonderful projects. And we're partnering with that program to leverage for grants. We have a number of projects on the table. I think the big one that you may have seen this year is we have been working with the Army Corps of Engineers on their water level management through that Winnebago Waterways Program. And we've made some small adjustments as far as when they refill the lake and how high that water goes for the average summer water level. And then when they do the drawdown, which they're starting right now, it's the end of October. So you had a normal spring this year where we didn't have the high water and the water was shallower, and that allowed more plant growth. And if you were on the lakes, you probably saw more plant growth this year. And that resulted in, I think, cleaner water this year because there was a lot more plants growing on the system. So it's definitely a multi-prong approach as far as the water quality on the lakes. I mean, I'm just talking about the lakes here, but then you have the whole watersheds that we're actively doing, like was talked about earlier with the non-point pollution, to work with the farmers as far as the runoff. But it's a combination of work on the lakes and working with the farmers to get that water clean. But I think we're on the right track, and it's really gaining momentum and really an exciting time, I think, for the county to protect these valuable lakes we have.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, it's I think that you know, obviously these changes and improvements, you know, you're not going to expect to see them in over 1 year. It's going to take, you know, 5 to 10 years. It's, you know, it takes time for all of that to occur. But yeah, I do think that it's certainly exciting. I know that you mentioned about the break walls, and I think that there, if I recall correctly, there was going to be some break walls that was proposed along Lake Winneconne. And just wanted to get some a progress report on that front. How is that coming along?
Sure. Yep. I applied for a grant for 2 break walls on the North Shore in Winneconne. And in the winter of 2020, we completed one of those break walls. That would be the Clarks Bay Corporation break wall. And that was done in 2020. That is complete. And this last winter, you can see it from the Winnebago Bridge. It would be the Allen and Valerie Stabino break wall. If you look north from the bridge, you can see the break wall, part of the break wall. We got half of it done and the river opened it up. We took our shots out there and 2 days later it was open water. So we're able to get 50% of that project done, and we're hoping for cold temperatures this winter to finish that project. So yeah, 2 great projects. We're doing some monitoring on them and a really nice response with the plants pretty quick here.
Where are those grants coming from?
That was several funding sources. The main funding source that I applied for was NRDA, and those are funds from the PCB cleanup with the paper companies. There's a pot of money for habitat work. So I got, I think it was around 221,000 from that program. And then Lake Poygan Sportsman's Club, I secured some funds. We have a local program. The landowners kicked in money. And then there was some NAWCA money. It's North American Conservation Something Act funds as well. So yeah.
Bunch of people kicking in. I like to hear that. So
makes your money go further. It definitely leverages funds that way.
Yes, indeed. One last question regarding those break walls. I mean, what's the estimated lifespan on those break walls? Are they just pretty much there for forever? I mean, is there 50 years? Do we have to go back in there and do some maintenance on it? Just give me an idea.
Yeah, so the first one was a test one that we did in Winnebago County in 1998. That one is still there. It's perfectly functioning. We've learned a lot since then. So a lot of engineering goes into it through our department, where I think 50 years is not unrealistic with these, unless, I mean, if you get a major ice shove, it may move some of the stone around. So we might do a little bit of capping and repairs, but they're usually there for the long haul. And that's the beauty of these projects. You get them put in, they're a little bit expensive up front, but once they're in, you can pretty much walk away. And it's the water quality behind these break walls is just night and day. It's crystal clear water behind the break wall compared to the dirty turbid water on the outside. And then the habitat that you create, and as those plants get established, they're holding that lake bottom and they're taking up nutrients, and it's called the legacy phosphorus. So all the runoff is sitting in the bottom of the lake. So those plants are taking up a lot of those nutrients and reducing the phosphorus, which causes the algae blooms on the system. So
yep. Okay, cool. Thank you for answering all those questions. I appreciate it. That's
You're
all
welcome.
I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. I don't see any other call-ins. So that'll conclude our land and water conservation budget review. We have one other departmental budget review, and that's number 14, the solid waste department budget review. That starts on page 598. And before we go to Director Robbie, Executive Damel, do you have any comments in regards to the solid waste budget?
Yeah, the big change here was adding the positions to our TO. They're county paid employees. I figured that it should be on our table of organization. So that was the big change that we did this year.
Very good, thank you. Director Robbie, any other highlights or review you want to provide regarding solid waste budget?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Executive Damel. I just want to make a couple of highlights here. I guess, first of all, for the solid waste department, all the expenses are funded by user or tipping fees. So we're not part of the tax levy at all. We don't use any tax levy dollars. We have 16 full-time employees. There were no changes from the previous year. So what we try to do is balance our tipping fees to offset our expenses. And so for 2022, we have a $2 per ton increase in the solid waste tipping fee, bringing it to $48 a ton gate rate, which is still approximately 30% lower than the statewide average. So we run a very efficient operation here at Winnebago County. We also have included a $10 decrease in our recycling tipping fee for our signing municipalities, bringing it down to $5 a ton. And that is a result of some of the changes in improving commodity market sales that we're realizing through the latter half of 2021. So the net result is a relatively balanced budget with a surplus of $16,000
Very good. Thank you, Director Robbie. We'll open up for any questions from any county board supervisor. Any questions from any county board member? Supervisor Finch, I believe you have a question. Supervisor Finch? If you have a question, just go ahead and open up. No? If you could go ahead and open up your mic, Supervisor Finch.
How am I now?
We can hear you now. Please go ahead,
Okay.
Supervisor Finch.
I just want to say Winnebago County has been very blessed over these years. John Raby and his staff has done a remarkable, fantastic job. And how do I know this? Because I used to be on that committee. I mean, they work hard and they've done nothing, in my opinion, but do the best thing for Winnebago County and get the best wages for the for the recycling and everything. We're very fortunate and lucky to have John and his staff. So John, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Schellinger, followed by Supervisor Ellis. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Mr. Chairman, so I think it's really nice to have the positions listed in the organizational table. That's really helpful. I have just one question for the director. I think I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the capacity or the life capacity, I guess, of the available space at the Brown and Outagamie County facilities.
Certainly. I guess the Winnebago County, we stopped being a regional landfill in 2012. So we're relying right now on our partners, part of the Tri-County group, Outagamie and Brown County. Since 2012, we have been sending our waste to the Outagamie County Northeast landfill. That still has approximately 2 years of airspace left. But one of the newest developments is the Brown County South landfill is being constructed. Currently is just finishing up later this year. So in 2022, we are going to be sending our waste to 2 different landfill sites. We're going to be sending some to the Brown County South landfill and some to the Outagamie County Northeast landfill. One of the accomplishments that we had in 2020 was negotiating and signing an amended Tri-County solid waste agreement extension, which essentially takes the available airspace, which was approximately through 2027, and adds another 15 years of airspace onto the agreement. So right now, between the 2 sites, and this is probably conservative, we're looking at our regional agreement of having airspace out to 2042 currently.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Last question. That with a switch from the Outagamie facility to the Brown County facility, is that going to is that a cost that is that cost increase that we're going to be looking forward to next year?
There is. It's a little more complicated, but we're opening the Brown County site in 2022, and because of increasing tonnages into our system, it's becoming more and more of a challenge to just run one landfill site at a time. To allow us a little more flexibility, we're going to be running 2 landfill sites, similar in size, probably in the 300,000 plus tons per year of waste. So there is going to be some added operational costs associated with running 2 landfill sites. But as part of some of the ideas that we've negotiated into the Tri-County agreement extension, there's also going to be some shared costs that weren't shared in the past. Two of the biggest ones being shared hauling costs. So the additional cost that it's going to take to get waste to Brown County is going to be now part of the whole system, not just the Winnebago County expense, which is a good thing for Winnebago County. Also, our solid waste transfer station operations. So the equipment and the manpower and the building and the compactors to move the waste from our site to these regional landfills is also going to become a system cost and shared. So there is a kind of a balance. We're saving in those 2 instances, but the overall cost for landfill operations is going to be a little higher because of the dual landfill operations. So I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Next speaker is Supervisor Ellis, followed by Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Ellis. You can go ahead and open up your mic, Supervisor Ellis.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
I was just, John, I was just thinking here, as I was going through all these budgets here, Parkview is given $3,200,000, hey, to help the levy. And then you got the Board of Health is putting in $800,000, hey, and I think the solid waste has got quite a huge reserve. Is there any chance that some of that money could be used for to help the levy in the Winnebago County?
That's a good question, Supervisor Ellis. We've been diligent in trying to set aside dollars for future expenses. Now we were able to negotiate an extension to our regional agreement with our partners at Outagamie and Brown, adding another 15 years, but there's going to come a time when we're likely going to need monies to look at another landfill site somewhere in Winnebago County. And that is becoming more and more costly. I guess, for example, the landfill that's being developed at Brown County currently is looking at about a $40 million expense over its life. There's also some other funds that are kind of earmarked for our reserve dollars related to potential issues regarding PFAS, so the forever chemicals that are associated with like firefighting foams and those sort of things. You're seeing more of that come into the media about groundwater contamination and how different communities are going to address it. So we're having to set aside more dollars for that. But it's certainly something that I could discuss with the county executive and could discuss with our solid waste management board. But there are reasons behind why our retained earnings balance is the way it is right now.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
I'm mute here. Thank you, John. What is your minimum fee to dump something at the dumps? I'm told it's $15. Is that correct?
Right now, the minimum charge to dispose of any kind of waste materials here is $20. It was increased in the middle part of 2020 from $15 to $20 a load.
I've had several of my constituents complain about that and claim it's just getting too costly to take something to the dump, because obviously they might have a small amount that they think the $20 is prohibitive. What is your forecast for that number? You expect it to keep going up, or? could some of this money be applied to bring that down to help the residents of this county?
Well,
To lower that.
Sure. I guess there's no plan currently to change that number in 2022. We were going to keep it at $20, minimum load charge of $20. That matches what Brown County is doing. But it's certainly something that could be discussed with our solid waste management board, looking at our economics and see if a downward pricing change is recommended. But at this point in time, plan to just keep it at $20 a load.
I think perhaps the biggest complaint I'm getting is somebody could take in a large trailer load and pay $20. And the next guy is bringing in a load of leaves and he's paying $20. So that's kind of where you get the disparity.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
Just add on to Chuck's a little bit. I think that's why you see so much debris on the side of the town roads and the county roads, because they may have an odd chair. They don't want to pay $20 to get rid of the chair, so they just throw it on the side of the road, and then the highway department has to pick it up. You know, I would think if there would be a reasonable fee, like a dumpster where they could put a small amount in for $10, you would see people utilize that rather than just going down some road that's not being utilized and throw it in the ditch, and that's the end of it. They don't have to worry about it. The reason I really raised my hand was to ask you, you said you had plans of purchasing land in Winnebago County for a future landfill. Are you actively looking for that now? Because as we have more subdivisions going up in Winnebago County, the land is getting to be less. So I would think that you would be actively looking for a piece of land right now for a future landfill, if that's your intention.
As of right now, we're not actively looking, but it's something that the board has brought more forefront, and we'll be looking at that in 2022, but actively searching for additional parcels, potential parcels in the county that we could site a landfill at. So,
because I would think, you know, even if you buy it and don't utilize it and you find something down the road, you're going to sell it for a profit. Price of land is never going down.
Right.
So, you know, you're getting nothing for your $38 million that you got sitting in reserves. If you buy a piece of land and it's going up at, like, if inflation's 5.9%, that piece of land just went up 5.9%. So it's beneficial to the solid waste to be actively looking for a piece of land now.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Bender.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you. Based on Mr. Bender's comments, if the county's looking for land to establish basically a dump, how big of a parcel of acres would you be looking at?
Well, that's a good question, Supervisor Fari. You know, typically we'd probably start looking at something at least 300 acres. You know, the bigger and you know, more square the parcel, the better. But yeah, I think we'd probably be looking at somewhere in that 300 plus acre range to develop a new site.
Okay, and then soil types and all that have a lot to do with it also, I assume.
That's correct. Clay being optimum, correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. I don't see any other hands up. Are there any other comments or questions about the solid waste department budget? Supervisor Finch, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was fortunate enough, blessed enough, whatever, to be on that committee for a while. And them people that work there, they go out of their way to do what's best for Winnebago County. That's what's best for them. But we're very blessed and fortunate to have John and his group to work for us. So therefore, whatever John says, he's working hard to get what's best for Winnebago County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude the solid waste department budget. That actually concludes all our departmental budgets. So let me just review the process and then see if there are any other questions from anyone before we would adjourn today. So we've completed our departmental reviews today. So the plan would be tomorrow that we would reconvene at 4 p.m. If you have any amendments, please continue to work with finance on verbiage and line items and dollar amounts. You can continue to do that. What we're asking is that you do that no later though than 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's to ensure that they have enough time to be able to actually craft the amendment language and crunch the numbers, so to speak. But the sooner you can do it, the better. And the plan would be that then those would be distributed to all of you by 2 p.m. tomorrow. They would also be published, so that via email, but they would also be published on the Winnebago County website for all of you to see them on the website as well, and for the public to have an opportunity to see them as well. So then we would reconvene once again at 4 to take up all of the amendments individually. Once those are all considered, then we would take up a final vote on the budget as amended or with those amendments that were approved. With that, any questions from any of you on the process or anything else related to the 2022 budget? Okay, I don't see any hands up. So
Sorry,
with-
Mr. Chairman.
Please
I'm
go ahead,
sorry,
Supervisor
I
Powers.
couldn't get that button up. It's Supervisor Powers. So we meet again tomorrow at 4. Do we know approximately how long that meeting will last? Because I may have to switch something around that I wasn't counting on.
Unfortunately, that's hard for me to answer for you because it just depends on how many amendments we have and how much discussion it would have. My guess, though, is that it'll go approximately up to 3 hours, but I have no real idea.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, what we do know is there are 12 amendments. But obviously, some amendments will engender more discussion than others. So it's really difficult to answer, but that was my ballpark guess. Very good. Thanks, Supervisor Powers. Next is Supervisor Snyder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was kind of surprised that we had all this nice conversation about the land and water conservation in Winnebago County, and none of us said anything about the front of our book. Every single picture on the front cover is from the Land and Water Conservation Department. So anyway, I suppose we were all more concentrating on what was in it rather than what's on it. But at any rate.
Fair point, though, Supervisor Snyder. All right, thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Any other comments before we wrap it up today, and then we would reconvene at 4 p.m. tomorrow? Okay, seeing none, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn till 4 p.m. tomorrow.
I move we reconvene November 3rd at 4 p.m.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for us to reconvene at 4 p.m. tomorrow, November 3rd. All those in favor say aye.
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 Have a nice rest of the afternoon, everyone. Bye now.